Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my blog, where it is both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of both inspiring you and giving you specific takeaway, all with the intent that your journey can be at least a little bit easier. Now, before I fully begin, I would love to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me. I hope it does to you. So let's get into things. Last vlog episode was really about, what's been going on non-creatively in my life, specifically the LA fires and things like that. Now, kind of a quick update on that just in general. It's one of those things that, as we were sort of all collectively mentally trying to get back to a new normal, and obviously that meant different things to different people. I myself was very grateful, privileged, lucky to, not be affected too much by the fires, right? It's not like I lost anything, things of that nature, so I could, resume work and things like that. Other people obviously not so lucky, so they have to deal with, insurance, considering rebuilding and stuff like that. But I think the one thing that, as of right now, we are all grateful for is the rain in LA. I think collectively everyone's very happy that, the rain's sort of helping all of us out and putting out these fires, because it was touch and go. When I talk about resuming to normalcy, we all wanted to start that sort of rebuilding phase, again, whatever that meant to each individual person. And yet, there was a new fire that cropped up, the Hughes fire, and that was 10,000 acres, just like that. And there was one that was touch and go called the Sepulveda fire, near the 405 and things like that, kind of like the Palisades fire, was getting closer to me and stuff like that. Luckily, they contained that. But, so it's like this odd sort of feeling, at least for me. I can only speak from my experience, where the song, you get comfortably numb and you're just okay, this is our new reality of there's fires around me, and we got the firefighters to deal with it, and if I have to evacuate, I evacuate, but business is normal type of thing. Now, as part of that, so all that to say, I'm not going to really dwell beyond the fires at the moment. You can get, like I said, if you missed the last episode, you can get a lot of the thoughts in terms of, what happened, stuff like that there. In this episode, I want to sort of talk about the aspect of not being able to really will things and control things, right? In a lot of the creative projects that I've worked on in years past, even though I've had other people be a part of it, I was able to shoulder a lot of the weight and be able to, push the project forward. I could be my own cinematographer, my own editor, my own writer, my own director. With this latest project that I'm working on, it's a 2D animated feature in the style of, Hayao Miyazaki and whatnot. And it's very ambitious, right? Now, first and foremost, I'm not someone that draws, right? So a lot of times, animation directors actually do their own storyboards. I could maybe do some stick figures and things like that. If anything, my way of storyboarding this would be just with these action figures that I got, and then photographing it and stuff like that, rather than drawing it. But, that obviously has its own limitations as well. So the point being, whether it's just from the foundational standpoint of the animation itself, all the way up to something like the financing, it's something that I cannot simply will on my own, right? I need to, in many ways, one of the first times ever, kind of let go of the reins and propel things forward, but allow others to really help me, right? It's, in an odd way, it's a humbling experience when you have to depend on people for all of these things. And it's certainly made harder in the climate of our industry, right? In terms of Hollywood has suffered for the past few years. In terms of the studios, they're very hesitant to greenlight a project that is not a known IP. They want something that's been a book, that's already a franchise, a spin-off, whatever else. Regardless of in terms of my movie, yes, it would be a few $1,000,000, but as far as a movie project, that's actually a very low risk, potentially high reward sort of situation. And yet people in this industry are so adverse to risks, and they lean on, all the data and algorithms and this and that. And it really is quite sad, right? Because at the end of the day, if their algorithms and their data were true, then every movie would fail. And, that isn't the case. And movies that we don't think are going to do well, and vice versa, and yada, 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 right? So no one knows shit, right? But however, again, I'm not in the driver's seat of that. I can point to that and be a staunch advocate and really, try to push for it if I'm in a meeting and stuff like that, to say here's all the benefits of my movie and highlight why it is low risk with high reward and stuff like that. But overall, I have to navigate within that, right? And part of that is also, looking at the landscape. And so for us, knowing kind of LA is in the state that it's in between the fires and, as I mentioned, the greater sort of state of our industry, filmmaking within Hollywood, it's okay. As I tell many people, this is a portion of the industry. When people talk about the industry, they think Hollywood is it. It's not it. I love foreign movies, and there's so many movies out there that are made every year. And even the foreign movies that I see are just a fraction of what is truly available out there. And so I know it all exists out there. I, along with the rest of my team, have to tap into that and get a little creative in terms of how we move the project forward. Specifically, the biggest need, right, is the funding. Whereas before, as I made mention, I could will it in the sense that, yes, we could get a little bit of crowdfunding money, and even whatever amount we got, that was good enough. I could supplement the rest, and off to the races we were, and boom, 2 movies were made, sort of a thing. This is not that situation, right? Where we truly do need outside funding in order to make this. I know that funding exists. It's just how to get to it, and who are the right partners. And I say right partners because you don't want to just take any deal. And throughout this whole process, kind of like all things creatively, you just have to accept the no, because you may get literally 1,000 no's, but what you're really looking for is 1 or 2 yeses, and that's all you really need. And through this whole experience, it has been very eye-opening in many ways. All the things, you don't always consider as a filmmaker in terms of the markets, right? Of who's looking for what. When we talk about the adversity of the Hollywood industry, well, people in other markets, like China, for example, when it comes to animation, they really prefer very high quality 3D, and they don't like a lot of 2D animation. Japan is the opposite way. It's, a lot of Pixar movies don't do well there for that reason. They like their own stuff with the 2D animation, and more specifically, not even just 2D animation, but there's a sensibility to their actual animation, right? From Japan. And, luckily, I'm grateful that there's somebody that we know that's a big advocate of ours from Japan. But, he was giving us feedback based on, financiers and studios there, that it's very tough to get someone not from Japan money. And even, when they offshore animation to, let's say, Taiwan or South Korea or something like that, as good as those animators may be, they can't quite capture the exact lines and facial features, eyes, and so forth that just Japan audiences are able to suss out within an instant, right? And that makes sense, and just the state of the reality, right? So, I'm not saying we have to necessarily go chase that and whatever else, because also the other part of, as far as my movie is concerned, that I've learned is that, like, the story itself is a very Western story. So, it has essentially these mythical elemental behemoths and so forth, right? And that in of itself is a very sort of Western notion, apparently. It's one of the things that, like, I'm very curious now to, like, deep dive Japanese culture more, because, like, as much as I love anime and have consumed anime, there's a whole undercurrent that I don't know as far as their culture, their own mythology and so forth, that I'd be fascinated to learn. Not because necessarily I want to change my story to fit that, but more so from the perspective of just understanding, right? Like, I love, I'm a xenophile, right? Like, I love learning about other people's cultures in that way. But yeah, I mean, me and my Japanese friend, the sort of one who's our advocate, we jokingly called my story like the Game of Thrones, which, by the way, it is nothing like Game of Thrones whatsoever. But just because of the elemental behemoths, right? Like, it's sort of one Venn diagram overlap, and by that, like, that makes a very Western story versus, like, what Japanese people like. And so it's just very interesting to learn all this and so forth, and ultimately just have to navigate it, right? And see where the opportunities are and be able to, go after them accordingly. And looking really at the world as a truly global market in that way, and seeing it, and yeah, so that's been sort of fascinating. And collectively, my team, as we're returning to our normalcy from everything that's been happening locally, these are the discussions that I'm having with them of, okay, where are the opportunities? How do we approach it in the best way possible? So, I'll keep you posted. There's like, last year we went to the American film market, which, as the name implies, is a market to buy and sell movies, right? And there are others throughout the world. And so we're looking at the right one strategically to go after. So I can tell you, on my mind, Cannes is a big one. That's also a big, like, bucket list item for me. I've always dreamed of attending the Cannes Film Festival. Now, part of my dream is always to attend it as a filmmaker who has a movie at the Cannes Film Festival. And so there's that festival side of it, but then also, as an undercurrent of it all, there's buyers and sellers, so there's a whole market beyond just the movies that are obviously screened there, right? And so that could be a potential opportunity. Unfortunately, things like Berlin and things like that, they're too soon. They're like in February and stuff like that, and they're great markets. I would love to attend them, but time-wise, financially, and so forth, doesn't quite work out. But Cannes is in, like, May, so that makes sense. And then a big one for animation specifically is something called Odyssey. And so, really looking to, like, if there's one this year that we just, like, flat out need to go to, that's it. And that's in June. And, even though it's not a film market, the World Animation Summit every year happens in Los Angeles. It's a wonderful, wonderful event. Again, it's not like a market outright, but just to be ingratiated into the animation world, that's a wonderful event. And because it's local, obviously that saves on a lot of cost, so of travel, hotels, and so forth. So, just really kind of putting myself out there where filmmakers are. And even if they can't outright help, just the project, word of mouth being out in the world, and that's what I'm really doing, and I have some friends, I respect their need for just slowing down and kind of being homebodies and stuff like that. And I do too, ultimately. Like, trust me, I'm more of that type of person, but I also know if I'm going to get this project off the ground, it really is just a matter of, like, you know, getting in front of as many faces and places as I can. And so that's the task I've been doing. Like, even this week, the Academy Museum is doing kind of like a networking event for filmmakers, but done in a way of like speed dating. So they'll kind of, you know, you'll get there, you know, they'll set you down, and then you meet with someone for a minute, then whatever, the buzzer goes off, then everyone rotates, you meet another person, and hopefully, you know, you find ways to collaborate together and whatever else. So that's something that I'm excited for. So yeah, as I said, like, really seeing all the opportunities, both micro all the way to macro, just to keep this thing going. And you know, at times it's a weight that, for lack of a better term, like it's a big weight to shoulder. But at the same time, there's this notion of, you know, responsibility is a privilege, right? You know, nothing is granted to us and so forth. And I truly believe in this project. And like, the way I sort of, you know, tell it to my closer friends, like, listen, in its current form, as far as like the script and so forth, like, it still has a little shortcomings. But when it is fully as intended and all the nuts and bolts of the script and, you know, later on the animation and so forth, like, this will be something truly, truly special, right? Like, when it is made as truly intended, it will be a very special project that I know in my heart of hearts a lot of people will love. And, you know, without any disrespect to my past movies, you know, those I knew were great movies, were special, but I knew that they were more for, let's say, art house audiences, right? I mean, I was very much inspired by people like Wong Kar-wai and Richard Linklater and stuff like that, and obviously they have tremendously loyal audiences, but they're not necessarily global audience. I mean, they are global audiences, but it's not like Marvel, right? You know, as far as its popularity and so forth. Now, I'm not saying what I'm creating is, you know, on the level of Marvel and stuff like that, but I do believe, like, it has the most commercial viability that it has, and that's why I don't feel bad, like, it when I pitch, even though people have that reserved nature to them, I do see it as a business investment, right? With a great opportunity for return on that investment for, you know, whatever person, whatever studio is footing the bill. And I also know how to, as I said, minimize the risk by keeping the budget low. Like, that's what I've been doing my whole life because of necessity, right? So, yeah, you know, it's kind of in that way how we are approaching all of this. So I will keep you posted as time goes on. Now, shifting gears to something kind of very tangential, but something that's been going through my mind is, you know, this past week, because of, you know, the inauguration and so forth, a lot of tensions are high, you know. I don't want to judge it whether that's right or wrong or so forth, but tensions are high. What I will sort of talk about is this idea of discussion. Like, I see a lot of podcasts, right? And obviously that's a world that I'm very versed in, you know. So there's a lot of wonderful podcasts out there that I listen to, and there's a lot of people that I follow that, you know, I don't necessarily always agree with, but I think have an interesting perspective. But more and more recently, I've been noticing, like, the stuff that, you know, various people are posting, and by the way, it seems to happen to everybody. Well, they'll post something like a clip from an episode, and they'll get so much backlash for it. And it's interesting to read the various comments. You know, some people will defend it, but, you know, a lot of times, majority, it's like, you know, just being like, how could you say this, this, and that? And, you know, then I watch the clip, and to some degree, I understand it. And the fascinating thing for me is, if I have one sort of criticism of how we're approaching social media It's that it's very clickbaity, right? We take the most salacious thing from an episode, and oftentimes it gets cut up, right? So it's not even the full context of like, here's the 1 minute clip of what was truly said, in quote unquote that 1 minute of real time. No, it's like, 5 minutes worth that gets cut down into a 1 minute. And so it's just like boom, 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 boom. And, oftentimes the people that did the podcast, whether it's the guest, whether it's the person, they're like defending it. You don't have the context, go listen to the episode or this and they're sort of, furls up and they're ready to kind of like brawl against any sort of criticism. And again, like, I'm not going to say whether that's right or wrong, for people having that backlash, for people commenting, but, meaning the people that made the content commenting back. But I will say, like, one of the things that I've tried to do is whenever I see that, I try to really go then listen to the full episode, in its entirety to really get at, okay, what are they truly saying? Let me truly listen to it unfiltered, in the context as intended and how they said it and so forth. And, it doesn't mean I necessarily always agree with what's being said, but it gives food for thought and is far less just in your face gut punch as the social media clip implies. That social media clip is very salacious. And, the theory of it in many ways is obviously engagement, for your social platforms, it grows. And, the more you can, get people commenting, the better, right? Cool. Crap, like that's what Facebook and all these other social media platforms have built it on, is just rage baiting everyone into submission, right? But the other half of that notion is that, like, okay, by putting this clip out there, it will engage enough people where they'll want to then check out the full episode. It's a promotional vehicle to get people to check that out. And when it comes to that, listen, I'm sure that there are enough people that end up going to listen to the episode and stuff like that. But I wonder, like, how can we do it in a more truthful, honest way that isn't clickbaity, that isn't, the sort of bashing and maybe is the naive idealist in me. But I would really like to have those conversations. And I don't know, like, I just look at, like, I wonder how much posting of those clips that create that sort of backlash, end up having a deleterious effect in the long term versus just being like, yes, it might not get as many clicks and whatever, it might not get as much of an ROI, but I know plenty of podcasters that kind of are more steady and true in that way where, they don't actively pick out the thing that they know is just going to rub people the wrong way. And it doesn't mean that you can't talk about current events respectfully and so forth, but I just think people, like, in particular, let's say in the past week, the Elon Musk hand signal, right? Whether or not it was a Heil Hitler or not. Like, that in and of itself, like, you post anything about that, you're going to get a certain response. And when your take on it is meant to be very nuanced, to just deduce it down to a minute of just, again, like, what ultimately is, 5 minutes, 20 minutes or whatever, just, it's all chopped up. You kind of have to know the response you're going to fucking get. And so it just boggles my mind, I think about these things in that way, and we really have to just, I don't know, like, I want us to be in a place to really be able to talk about ideas and stuff like that, which is extremely difficult to fucking do when everyone's just already on, level 12 out of 10 to like go at each other's throats, So, for whatever that's worth, I don't know. I think about that, and it's why with the stuff that I do, I constantly get people emailing me, that don't know me. They're like, "Hey, I'm really, I really want to help you with your stuff, blah blah blah." Or like my friends, they're like, hey, you like your shit could be so much better if you did X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, I know. It could be. And, there's definitely strategies and things like that, but it's not within me to go after that, number one, in that way, right? Secondly, just point blank, like, episodes like this and the stuff that I do, like, I appreciate it. I'm very grateful that people get something out of it. But my bigger goal overall is to create the art that I create, right? The movies, the books, and stuff like that. And so this, with all due respect to both myself and you, I guess, for listening to this, is secondary, right? It's not intended to be the primary driver, unlike for most people. And that's why, I can keep this stuff free, and B, like any of the recommendations I give, they're not sponsored in that way because I really don't need it. I mean, listen, would it be great to have money? Yeah, of course. Like, yeah, but not at the cost of, I don't know, I don't want to be someone's puppet and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know. These are some of the larger things I think about societally and whatnot. So, yeah. Two more things that I want to kind of highlight just real quick. There was a recent episode of The Tim Ferriss Show with Chris Sacco. You might know him from Shark Tank. He talked about that as a family, they considered what their legacy was. And just the beautiful notion of that and kind of what that meant. So him and his wife really sat down and went over, like, if they passed, what would they want their kids to take away from them as human beings, parents, and so forth. And that's a beautiful notion. Like, they had essentially created like an 18-page document of what that meant for them. And, I'm sure things like, kindness and whatever else, like, you throw that in. But yeah, just really sitting with that. Like, we all, in some sense, I feel like, fear death. And we want to have this broader sense that we're creating a legacy. But without really defining that, you're just kind of grasping at straws and letting other people sort of define your legacy. Now, granted, even if you write down, of course, like, they did an 18-page full-on, like, what you wouldn't want your legacy to be, at the end of the day, other people define your legacy in that way. But I think two things. Number one, by having it written down, like with anything, you can go after it a little bit better, and then, that's what people start to see. And secondly, having it in a document form, it is a document that can be passed down through a will to, your children and their children and stuff like that. So it's like a keepsake, right? It's something very beautiful in that way. Like, I think the term, so, people make a will, right? Like, here's the money, the house, and all that I'm giving to, whoever when I pass away. But then there's also, I believe the term is called a living will, and it's essentially kind of more of, what people meant to you, sort of a thing. So it's less about the logistical aspect, more about the emotional aspect. And so the idea of creating your legacy is not quite like a living will, because again, you're kind of expressing more to people like a final message, but it could be a part of it, right? Where this is kind of what you're handing down and what you want them to take away. So it could be, a mantra of like, give while the hand is warm, which is, don't wait to be gracious, and donate to charity when you're dead. Do it throughout your whole life and things like that, So all these different things, and that's a beautiful thing to really consider. So I really appreciated that idea. So, that's kind of what I've been also thinking about. So lots of stuff. And then the last sort of tidbit from that same episode, is that, a lot of times new entrepreneurs, they don't know when to fire somebody. And, they worry about the cost of firing versus like, what's the cost of keeping them on? If someone is adding more work to your plate than they're taking away, is that really beneficial? And the way they sort of describe it is, if you have to talk about an employee 3 times during pillow talk, then they got to go. Like, they're clearly affecting you in a very negative way. And, I think there's some nuance to it that I'm not going to fully get into now in terms of how I view it, because I don't think it's outright like such a hard and fast rule. That because in short, like, we can't just look at people as automatons and stuff like that. But I do consider that notion, for sure. And it's not like I'm not saying it because I'm having to like fire people left and right. Like, in fact, one of the things for me is I feel like I'm overall very good at hiring people, right? And making sure that the people I bring on board with projects are top notch. And anyone that might be on the fence, they only come in for short term things, and that's my way of testing them out and seeing, okay, can we work together in the longer term as well? So yeah, there you have it. These are the musings of a madman. No, I kid. But yeah, kind of this is the top line stuff that I've been working on, that I've been thinking about in this past week. So, let me know your thoughts on any of this. If you have any questions, thoughts of your own, or as always, if there's stuff that you would want me to talk about that I haven't talked about, by all means, comment down below or hit me up on social media. I would love to, whether it's through an episode or, through a vlog like this, address, I want to make these as specific to you as possible. So yeah, check that out. And also, just real quick before I fully wrap out, I do have my Patreon page, which has a lot of like behind the scenes stuff and whatever else, coaching sessions that are available to you. So it's more direct one-on-one. It's only $10 a month. So that's patreon.com/Svitek if you're interested. And I also have my Substack, which I kind of, in written form, break down various lessons. What is the lesson? How to apply it, and then an exercise prompt and whatever else, right? So that's on my Substack. Just search Phil Svitek. Those are ways to, become more involved and help support the stuff that I'm doing. And of course, I have my books and my movies that you can check out through my website, philsvitek.com. If you're so inclined, it would mean a lot to me if you did. Yes, thank you so much. I truly appreciate you. I'll see you next time.